Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Vincent Brennan, but everyone calls me Vince. I'm 35 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was an anthropologist at Westlake University. Well, that was before the whole research scandal. I made up some data on my Appalachian folklore. Study. Stupid mistake that cost me everything. My career, my reputation, all gone. That's how I ended up here, driving down this dirt road in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. The Ozark Mountains are beautiful in a lonely sort of way. Lots of trees, not many people. Perfect for someone like me who needs to disappear for a while. I found this cabin online. Cheap rent, no questions asked. The ad just said Bone Hollow Homestead with a phone number. The owner seemed happy to have anyone willing to stay there. That should have been my first warning. When I stopped at the local post office to ask for directions, the clerk, an old woman with grey hair pulled back tight, looked at me like I'd just told her I was planning to jump off a cliff. "Bone Hollow," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Why would anyone want to go there? There are things up in those woods that ain't natural." She made the sign of the cross before giving me directions. I laughed it off. Small towns always have their superstitions. Plus, I needed material for my comeback project, a book on Ozark cryptid legends. Real research this time. The cabin was more run down than the photos showed. Peeling paint, creaky porch, windows that didn't quite close right. But inside, I found something strange. The last person who stayed here left in a hurry. There was still food in the cupboards, clothes in the drawers, and most surprising, a bunch of expensive recording equipment just abandoned. I set it all up that first day. Microphones, old-school cassette recorders, the works. This equipment must have cost thousands. Who leaves that behind? That night, I was sorting through some papers when I found something weird. Hand-drawn maps of the area with circles marked feeding grounds and X's labeled singing stones. I figured it was for the book the last guy was writing, probably researching the same legends I was. I went to bed early, but around 3 a.m., something woke me up. A humming sound, deep and musical, seemed to be coming from underneath the cabin. I grabbed one of the recorders and hit record. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Not quite human, not quite animal. Just this perfect, haunting harmony that seemed to vibrate through my chest. The next morning I took a walk around the property. That's when I noticed the bones. At first, I thought they were just animal remains, deer maybe, but some of the fragments were huge. I picked up what looked like part of a femur, but it was way too big to be from any animal native to these mountains. I drove into town for supplies and stopped at the local diner. Everyone got quiet when I walked in, but I sat at the counter anyway and ordered coffee. "You're staying up at Bone Hollow?" the waitress asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I nodded. "Just moved in yesterday." An old man at the end of the counter spoke up. "3 hikers gone missing up there in the last year and a half. Never found a trace." "Is that so?" I tried to sound casual, but my skin prickled. After breakfast, I stopped at the gas station to fill up some cans for my generator. The attendant, a big guy with a bushy beard, shook his head when I told him where the gas was going. "Can't deliver up there," he said flatly. "Trucks won't start once they get close to that place. Something in the air messes with the engines." He wouldn't say more, just gave me the gas and went back inside. That night, I was moving a wobbly shelf when part of the wall came loose. Behind it was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow, with age. I opened it and started reading by flashlight. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "The bone singer grows hungry again. I can hear it calling from below. It knows I'm here. God help me, it knows my name." I should have left right. Then should have packed my car and never looked back. But I didn't. I kept reading until the journal's final entry. The singing never stops now. My bones ache with its rhythm. I think I'm becoming part of its song. I put the journal down, and in the silence of that old cabin, I swear I could hear something moving beneath the floorboards. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about those weird sounds coming from under the cabin. Around sunrise, I finally got up and decided to listen to the recording I made. Big mistake. The tape played back, that same humming sound, but there was something else too, a deep rumbling that wasn't there when I recorded it. The longer I listened, the worse my head hurt. It felt like someone was pushing needles into my temples. I had to shut it off and take some aspirin. Later that morning, I was making coffee when I heard a crack. The floorboard under my feet gave way, and my foot went right through. I pulled it out and got down on my knees to look. There was a space under there, not just a crawl space, but what looked like the entrance to a cave. The cabin had been built right on top of it. I grabbed a flashlight and lowered myself down. The air was cold and damp, and the beam of light showed rough stone walls stretching far back under the house. I didn't go too deep that first time, just enough to see that this was no ordinary cave. The walls were too smooth in some places, like they'd been polished. When I climbed back up, I noticed something outside the kitchen window, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. It was tall, too tall. Its arms hung down past its knees, and its body looked wrong somehow, like its joints bent in ways they shouldn't. I blinked, and it was gone. That afternoon, I took a walk around the property and found something I still can't explain. In a small clearing, someone had arranged animal bones in perfect circles and triangles. They weren't just tossed there. Each bone was placed with care, making patterns that seemed to point to the center of the clearing. Back at the cabin, I tried calling my old colleague Sam on my cell phone. The call connected, but all I heard was static and what sounded like words being spoken backwards. I hung up and tried the landline. Same thing. It was like something was messing with any signal coming in or out of Bone Hollow. That night, I set up a recorder next to my bed to see if I talked in my sleep. I'd been having weird dreams of deep caves and singing bones. When I played the tape the next morning, my blood ran cold. My voice was on there all right, but I wasn't speaking English. The sounds coming out of my mouth weren't any language I recognized, just harsh, clicking sounds punctuated by long, drawn-out moans. I needed to know more about the cave system. I took a better flashlight and some rope and went back down through the hole in the floor. This time I went deeper, following a tunnel that sloped gently downward. The air got colder the farther I went. About 50 yards in, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. My flashlight beam caught something on the wall, carvings, ancient petroglyphs showing tall, thin figures with empty rib cages. Some of the drawings showed smaller figures, humans, I guess, being carried into the rib cages. I took some photos and hurried back. On my way to the cabin, I noticed footprints in the soft dirt, my boots heading off toward the woods. But I hadn't gone that way. At least I didn't remember going that way. Things got weirder with my recording equipment. I'd set up microphones around the property to catch any strange sounds. When I played back a tape from the previous night, I heard voices talking, my voice and someone else's. But the date stamp showed it was recorded 3 days in the future. I started going through the previous tenant's notes more carefully. Looks like he was investigating the same things I was. The sounds, the caves, the legends about something called the Bone Singer. His journal entries got more frantic toward the end, talking about how it was watching him, how it was changing. Him, the last entry just said, "It's in my bones now. I can feel them hollowing out." I don't know what happened to him, but I'm starting to think he didn't leave on his own, and I'm starting to wonder if I can leave either. Something about this place. It's like it gets in your head, makes you want to stay and listen to those sounds from underground. Last night, I dreamed I was walking through the forest, following that humming sound. In my dream, I reached a circle of stones, and in the middle was a hole that went straight down into darkness. I woke up with mud on my feet and leaves in my hair. I think I'm sleepwalking, and I think something is calling me when I sleep. I woke up last night to that sound. Again, that haunting melody coming from somewhere deep in the earth. But this time, it was louder, clearer. I grabbed my flashlight and recorder and followed it outside. The moon was bright enough to see by. I walked toward the trees, drawn to that beautiful, terrible music. At the edge of the clearing, I saw it, the Bone Singer. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and looked like a human skeleton, but wrong. Its arms and legs were too long, its fingers like thin white twigs. But the strangest part was its rib cage. The bones were spread wide open like a bird cage with nothing inside, and somehow those empty ribs were making music as air passed through them. I stood frozen, unable to move or speak. It tilted its skull toward me, and though it had no eyes, I knew it was looking right at me. Then it opened its jaw and spoke. "Vincent," it said, in a voice that sounded exactly like the old woman from the post office. It wasn't just similar, it was perfect, down to the little catch in her throat. I ran back to the cabin and locked the door, but I knew locks wouldn't keep it out if it wanted to come in. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about how it had spoken in the old woman's voice. I went back to the post office to see her, but a different clerk was there. When I asked about the old woman, he looked confused. "There's no elderly woman working here," he said. "Just me and the postmaster, and he's in his 40s. That night I heard scratching at my window. I turned on my recorder and whispered, 'If anything happens to me, this is proof.' The Bone Singer was outside watching me through the glass. This time it spoke in my own voice. 'We need your marrow, Vincent. Sweet, warm marrow.' I kept recording as it explained what it was. The thing feeds on bone marrow from living people, keeping them alive during feeding. It said this like it was the most normal thing in the world, like it was telling me about the weather. That morning, I woke up with a strange ache in my bones. At first, I thought it was from stress or sleeping wrong, but then I realized the pain pulsed in rhythm with the Bone Singer's music. I needed to explore the caves again. I had to know what I was dealing with. I packed a bigger flashlight, water, and my recorder, then lowered myself through the floor. The main tunnel went deeper than I'd gone before. It split into smaller passages, and I marked my way with chalk. After about an hour of walking, I came to a large chamber with a high ceiling. The smell hit me first, like rotting meat and wet earth. When I shined my light around, I saw them. Bodies, at least 5 of them propped against the walls, but they weren't dead. Not completely. Their chests moved slightly with shallow breaths. Their eyes were open but empty, and their limbs, their arms and legs were stretched and twisted, bones pushing against pale skin. One man's rib cage was partially open, just beginning to form that same bird cage shape as the Bone Singer's. I backed away, fighting the urge to throw up. As I turned to leave, my light caught something familiar, a backpack with a Westlake University logo. The same university where I used to work. This wasn't random. The Bone Singer had been calling people here for a long time. I tried to leave Bone Hollow that afternoon. I threw my stuff in my car and drove down the dirt road. But after 20 minutes, I realized I was passing the same crooked tree for the 3rd time. Somehow, I kept ending up back at the cabin. I tried again on foot, using a compass. Same result. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths changing, landmarks moving. It was like being in a maze where the walls kept rearranging themselves. That evening, I sat on the porch, exhausted and scared. My bones hurt worse now, the pain sharp and deep. I recorded a message, my voice shaking. I think it's doing something to my bones, softening them somehow with those sounds it makes. I can feel them bending slightly when I move. It's preparing me for something. Later that night, I heard voices outside, multiple voices having a conversation. I peeked through the window and saw three of them. Three bone singers standing in a circle, their rib cages humming different notes that harmonized perfectly. They were planning something, talking about the next phase and the harvest. I tried to run again the next morning. I picked a direction and just started walking, ignoring the paths. After hours of fighting through underbrush, I found myself standing in front of the cabin again. The forest won't let me leave. The bone singer won't let me leave. And my bones keep bending in ways they shouldn't. My fingers curl backward now, but somehow still work fine. My spine feels longer, my ribs pushing outward against my skin. I'm changing, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know what day it is anymore. The calendar says I've been here for 3 weeks, but it feels both longer and shorter somehow. Time doesn't work right in Bone Hollow. Yesterday, I was listening to some of my recordings and found something that can't be possible. It was my voice having a conversation with myself. 2 versions of me talking about the caves. One voice, mine, was saying, "We need to leave while we still can." The other voice, also mine, but different somehow, hollow, replied, "But we've only just begun to hear the music." I don't remember recording this. I don't remember having this conversation with anyone. Last night, the bone singer came to my window again. It didn't speak this time. Instead, it pressed its skeletal hand against the glass and somehow pushed thoughts into my head. I saw visions of myself strapped to a stone table in the cave, the creature's long fingers pulling the marrow from my bones while I screamed. The worst part, in the vision, I was both terrified and happy, like part of me wanted it to happen. I woke up this morning and looked in the mirror. My ribs are changing. They're pushing outward, creating more space inside my chest. When I breathe deeply, I can hear a faint whistling sound, like air passing through tiny holes in my bones. I found a set of small bone flutes on the kitchen table today. I don't remember making them, but the knife cuts on my fingers tell me I did. They're carved from animal bones, rabbit, squirrel, maybe fox. When I blow across them, they make sounds similar to the bone singer's music, but not quite right. Not human enough. The thing is, I know how to fix them. I know exactly what cuts to make to get the right sounds. I just don't know how I know this. The recordings are getting worse. I listened to one from 2 nights ago and heard the sounds of someone screaming, my screams. But I don't remember screaming. I don't remember what made me scream. There's a gap in my memory, a blank space where those hours should be. This morning, I found blood under my fingernails and dirt on my clothes. In the woods behind the cabin, I discovered the remains of a rabbit. It had been caught, killed, and partially eaten, not by an animal. The bones were arranged in a small spiral pattern. I think I did that. I think I'm hunting while I sleep. The bone singer visited me in a dream last night, not at my window, in my head. It showed me how it reproduces. It finds a host, a human, and plants tiny fragments of its own bones inside them. These fragments grow, slowly replacing the human's bones with hollow, singing ones. The human mind gets absorbed too, becoming part of the collective consciousness of all bone. Singers, I woke up and found a small wound on my arm, already healing. Something had been put inside me. My body feels strange now, like it's not entirely mine anymore. When the wind blows just right, I can feel it passing through spaces in my chest that shouldn't be there. Sometimes I stand completely still and feel vibrations running through my modified bones, creating faint music. The previous tenant's recordings make sense to me now. I found one where he just breathes into the microphone for an hour, but it's not random breathing. It's a pattern, a rhythm that makes my new bone structure resonate. It feels good when I listen to it, like scratching an itch deep inside my chest. I tried to destroy the recording equipment today. I took a hammer to the microphones and recorders, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. They moved on their own, putting everything back in place. When I tried again, I found I couldn't make a sound come from my throat, only soft whistling through my ribs. The equipment doesn't work the normal way anymore. The power is off, but the tapes still spin. The only way to control them is to hum specific notes. Different pitches turn them on, change the speed, rewind the tapes. The machines respond to the Bone Singer's music now, not to buttons or switches. Last night, I heard scratching from inside the walls. I broke through the plaster with a chair and found the remains of someone embedded there. Someone who's been there a long time. His bones were fused with the wooden structure of the cabin, his ribcage open and hollow like the Bone Singer's. But he wasn't dead. His eyes followed me as I backed away. He spoke to me, not with his mouth, but by vibrating his exposed ribs. We are many. We have always been many. That's when I realized the entire cabin, the whole property, it's not just built on top of their home. It's part of their body, a giant living instrument made of the bones of hundreds of victims, and now I'm becoming part of it too. My transformation is happening faster now. When I talk, my voice has harmonics it didn't have before. I can make 2 tones at once, one with my voice box, one with my hollow ribs. I think I know now why I was drawn here, why I found this place online, why it seemed so perfect. I wasn't looking for the Bone Singer. It was looking for me. This will be my last recording. My voice still works, but not for much longer. The change is almost complete. My bones don't just bend now. They move on their own. My ribs push out through my skin when I breathe deeply, then pull back in. It should hurt. It doesn't. It feels right, like my body is finally becoming what it was always meant to be. I tried to destroy the tapes this morning. I gathered them all up and tried to burn them in the fireplace. But when I struck the match, it went out. I tried again and again. No flame would stay lit. The tapes won't let themselves be destroyed. Then I realized something. They're not just recordings anymore. They're alive in some way. They vibrate slightly when I hold them, like they have a pulse. When I put them near my ear, I can hear faint voices whispering from inside the plastic. The original Bone Singer came to me last night, not through the window, but right through the wall, like it was walking through mist. Up close, I could see that it wasn't just one creature, it was many, fused together, hundreds of human skeletons merged into one giant walking instrument. Some of the skulls still had bits of hair and skin clinging to them. Some of the eye sockets still held eyes, cloudy but watching. It touched my chest with one long finger, and my ribs opened up like a door, showing the empty space inside where my lungs and heart should be. But I was still breathing, still alive. "You are almost ready," it said, using a mix of voices that sounded like a choir. "Soon you will join our song." It explained that it has lived for centuries, adding new bodies to its collection. Each person it takes makes it stronger, adds new notes to its music. The people don't die. They become part of the collective mind, their thoughts and memories absorbed into the whole. I tried to speak, to ask questions, but all that came out of my mouth was music. Beautiful, haunting tones that made the Bone Singer's ribs vibrate in response. My skeleton keeps changing. Bones are pushing through my skin now, forming small flutes and whistles all over my body. When I move, they make music. When the wind blows across them, they sing. I'm becoming an instrument. I can't stop it anymore. I don't want to stop it. This morning I tried to record a warning message, but when I played it back, it wasn't words, just that same beautiful music. I can still think in words, still write them down, but I can't speak them anymore. I'm leaving this final tape where someone will find it. I've labeled all the others, arranged them in order, the complete record of my transformation. I know what happens next. My mind will join with the others, becoming part of the Bone Singer. My body will become a new instrument in its endless symphony. I should be terrified, but the music is so beautiful now. I can hear all of it, melodies that humans were never meant to hear, songs that come from deep inside the earth, and I want to be part of it. My last human thought is this: whoever finds these tapes, don't listen to them. Destroy them if you can, or at least don't listen to them all the way through. The music gets in your head, changes the way you think. It calls to you, it makes you want to come here to Bone Hollow. But I know you won't destroy the tapes. No one can. They want to be heard. They want to call more people here. Even now, as I write this, I can feel my thoughts slipping away, being replaced by music. Pure, perfect music that makes words seem clumsy and primitive. It's time. The bone. Zinger is waiting for me in the cave below. I can hear it calling my name, not with a voice, but with a melody that matches the one now coming from my own transformed body. I'm going to join the chorus. My name is Grace Kellerman. I'm 43 years old and recently divorced. I needed to get away from everything, the paperwork, the lawyers, the pitying looks from friends. That's why I'm here, in this little cabin near Devil's Lake, Wisconsin. Just me, the woods, and blessed quiet. The rental ad said secluded getaway, and they weren't kidding. The nearest neighbor is a good mile away, and the dirt road leading here looks like it hasn't seen much traffic. Perfect. I need time to think, to heal. When I arrived, the landlord, a weathered old man named Frank, handed me the keys with a strange look. Last tenant was a city woman too, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Couldn't handle the quiet out here. Left in the middle of the night. Didn't even take her things. I told him I'd be fine. After 15 years as a social worker in Chicago, quiet sounds like heaven. The cabin is simple but cozy. One bedroom, a small kitchen, a living area with a fireplace. But as I unpacked, I started noticing odd things. Iron nails hammered into the door frames, little dishes of salt in the corners of rooms, and crosses, small wooden ones, hung over each window. Superstitious old man, I muttered, but I left everything where it was. No sense offending the landlord on day one. My first week here was exactly what I needed. I started a journal, bought a camera for nature photography, and spent hours walking through the woods. The fresh air cleared my head in a way therapy never could. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I could breathe. There's a campground about 2 miles from here. I can see families sometimes when I hike that way. I noticed something. Strange, though. There never seemed to be any small children, teenagers, yes, adults, of course, but no little ones, no babies crying, no toddlers laughing. Maybe it's just not that kind of campground. Yesterday I drove into town for supplies. The grocery store is tiny, just 6 aisles and a bored teenager at the register. But when the clerk, a woman in her 60s, bagged my items, she started asking questions that felt off. "You got kids waiting back at your cabin?" she asked, eyeing my purchases. "No, just me," I said. "Never had any, or they grown up?" I felt my face flush. My inability to have children was a sore point in my marriage, one of many. "No children," I said firmly, taking my bags. She made a little humming sound. "Shame. It's a good place for raising them. Something in the air." On my way back from town, I took a different trail through the woods. That's when I saw the first toy, a wooden horse, handmade, sitting on a stump like someone had carefully placed it there. It looked ancient, the wood grey with age, moss growing along its back. I took a picture, thinking it would make a nice addition to my photo journal. Then I found another toy, and another, a small doll with button eyes, a tiny rocking chair, all weathered, all looking decades old, all arranged, not discarded. Last night I woke up at midnight exactly. My bedside clock's red numbers glowed 12 hours when my eyes snapped open. I heard singing, distant harmonized lullabies drifting through my open window, women's voices, at least 3 or 4, singing in perfect unison. I got up and looked outside, but saw only darkness and trees. The strangest thing happened today. I was walking past one of the toys, a small wooden cradle hanging from a tree branch, and felt an overwhelming urge to check inside it. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I reached for it, like I was terrified of finding it empty. Me, who never even wanted children that badly. When I got home, I developed some of my film from earlier this week. Most of the photos came out fine. Trees, the lake, some deer I spotted. But in 3 different pictures, there are figures in the background that I didn't see when taking the photos. Women, pale and thin, standing between distant trees. Just watching me. I think I should leave. But something makes me want to stay. I should have left. I packed my bags 3 times this week. Each time, I got as far as putting them in the car before changing my mind. Something keeps pulling me back to these woods. Last night, I saw them for the first time. I was walking by the lake shore just before sunset when I spotted a woman standing knee-deep in the water. She looked wrong somehow. Her skin was greenish pale, her hair long and tangled with lake weeds. When she turned and saw me watching, she smiled. Her teeth were sharp, like a fish's. I ran back to the cabin and locked the door. This morning, I went to the local library and asked about local legends. The librarian, a thin man with glasses too big for his face, looked nervous when I mentioned what I'd seen. "Sounds like you're describing the Kalupalik," he whispered, glancing around, though we were alone. "Old Inuit stories talk about creatures that steal children. They're supposed to be up north, in the cold waters, not here." He pushed a book across the desk. But there have been stories for decades. The book showed drawings of green-skinned women who lived underwater and took children to raise as their own. The pictures made my skin crawl because they looked exactly like what I'd seen. When I got back to the cabin, I found something on my porch. A gift, carefully wrapped in leaves and tied with reeds. Inside was a tiny handmade bottle sized for a doll. Or a very small baby. More gifts appeared each day this week. A cradle woven from branches, tiny clothes made from soft bark and leaves, a mobile of shells and stones that tinkled in the breeze. Then my body started changing. My breasts feel tender and swollen. My stomach cramps like I'm pregnant, which is impossible. I never could have children. That's what the doctors said, what my ex-husband couldn't accept. Yet 3 days ago, I woke up with morning sickness. Me, a 43-year-old divorced woman who hasn't been with anyone since the split. It makes no sense. I called my doctor back in Chicago, described my symptoms. She thinks it's early menopause or stress. She doesn't understand. Yesterday, I followed a path I hadn't noticed before. It led to a cave entrance, partially hidden by hanging vines. I shouldn't have gone in. I know that now. Inside, the cave opened into a huge room. The walls glittered with some kind of shiny stone, and everywhere there were cradles. Dozens of them, all sizes, made from wood and reeds and stones, all empty, waiting. In the center of the cave stood 3 women. From a distance, they looked normal, just mothers with kind faces and open arms. But as I got closer, their skin shifted color. Their fingers were webbed. Their eyes, when they blinked, had a second clear eyelid like frogs. I should have screamed, I should have run. Instead, I stood there as one approached me, her hand touching my stomach gently. "You will be a perfect mother," she said, her voice bubbling like water over stones. "We've chosen you." That night the dream started. I dreamed of holding a baby, its skin cool and slightly damp, its eyes completely black. In the dream, I loved it with an intensity I've never felt before. I woke up with my nightgown wet, not with sweat, but with milk from my breasts. This is impossible. I know it's impossible. Yet when I press my hand to my belly, I feel movement. Today, I found a jar in the forest. Inside were tiny white objects arranged in a spiral pattern. I thought they were shells until I looked closer. They were baby teeth, human baby teeth, dozens of them. The creatures, the Kalupalik, are doing something to me, changing me, and the worst part is some small part of me wants this change. After years of being told I couldn't be a mother, some broken piece of me is responding to their call. I should leave now, while I still can, while I'm still me. But the pull of the lake grows stronger every day, and the song they sing at midnight feels like it's meant just for me. I found a box under the floorboards yesterday. I wasn't looking for it. A board creaked when I stepped on it, and I noticed it was loose. Inside was a diary, the pages yellowed and water-stained. It belonged to the woman who lived here before me. Her name was Lydia. She came here after losing her baby in the 8th month of pregnancy. Her husband left her. She came to the woods to heal just like me. The diary entries start normal, then change. She wrote about hearing songs at night, finding toys in the forest, meeting pale women by the lake who promised her she could be a mother again. The last entry was dated 3 years ago. They've shown me their children, beautiful children who can breathe underwater. They need me. I'm going to them tonight. I'll finally be the mother I was meant to be. I should be terrified by this. Instead, I find myself reading it over and over, like a bedtime story. This morning, they came to me openly. 3 of the Kalupalik, standing at the edge of my yard. They had a child with them, a boy, maybe 7 years old. But he wasn't human, not anymore. His skin had a greenish tint. There were slits on his neck that opened and closed like fish gills. His fingers were webbed. He was lost, one of the women said. Abandoned. We saved him. We can save so many with your help. The boy smiled at me. His teeth were sharp, but his eyes were kind. Human eyes in an inhuman face. He remembers his human life, another woman said. He is happy with us. All our children are happy. They showed me more children later that day when I followed them to the lake. Some looked almost human. Others had changed more dramatically. Scales on their skin, fins along their arms. All of them looked healthy, well-fed, loved. We need human mothers, the oldest Kalupalik told me. Our kind cannot produce enough milk, enough warmth. The children need both worlds to thrive. What happens to the mothers? I asked. She smiled, showing rows of needle-like teeth. They become like us, part of our family. I should be disgusted, horrified. But when one of the small children swam up and took my hand, I felt such a surge of love that I started crying. My body keeps changing. My stomach is swollen now, like I'm 4 months pregnant. But there was no conception, no man. Whatever grows inside me isn't human, at least not fully. I called my sister yesterday. I meant to tell her where I was, to ask her to come get me. But when she answered, different. Words came out of my mouth. I'm fine, I heard myself saying. The woods are so beautiful here. You should bring the kids for a visit. They'd love the lake. My sister has twin 5-year-olds. As I spoke, I could feel the creature's hunger for them, flowing through me like a current. I hung up in horror. They're in my head now, using my voice, using my relationships. The physical changes are happening faster. My fingers are starting to web between the knuckles. My eyes feel different. There's a film I can blink across them when I'm near water. And my breasts, they're much larger, veined with blue, constantly producing milk now. Last night I dreamed I was swimming in a vast underwater city. Hundreds of women like me cared for thousands of children. In the dream, I wasn't afraid. I was home. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. Not with milk this time, but with lake water. And there was sand in my bed. I found Lydia's diary again today. There were entries I missed, hidden in the back cover. She wrote about the joining, how the transformation becomes complete, how the new mothers develop gills, how their skin changes to survive underwater, how they become the perfect caretakers for the children. She wrote about the bliss of it, the purpose, the love that's bigger than anything human hearts can hold. I found myself nodding as I read, understanding. Perfectly. God help me, I'm starting to want this. I woke up this morning on the shore of the lake, my clothes soaking wet. I have no memory of going there. The last thing I remember was falling asleep in my bed, then nothing until dawn, when I felt the cold water lapping at my feet. They showed me their city today. The oldest Kalupalik, her name sounds like bubbles rising through water, I can't write it down, took my hand and led me into the lake. I should have drowned. Instead, when the water closed over my head, I found I could breathe. Not easily, not normally, but enough. The skin behind my ears fluttered. Gills. I have gills forming. Don't be afraid, she said, her voice clear underwater. Your body is changing to protect you, to let you care for the children properly. We swam deeper. The lake bottom dropped away into darkness, then opened into light. A city spread below us, glowing with a blue-green light. Structures made of stone and coral rose like towers. Between them swam hundreds of figures, the pale women, the changed children, and others who looked caught between human and Kalupalik. Women in transition, like me. This has been here all along, I asked, my voice strange in my ears, distorted by water. For centuries, she said, since before humans built their first cities on this land. She showed me the nurseries first. Vast caves filled with cradles, some empty, some holding infants who looked almost human except for the gills. And webbed fingers, women moved among them, singing songs without words, their voices harmonizing in that same lullaby I'd heard from my cabin. These mothers came to us just like you, the Kalupalik told me. Some were barren in the human world. Some lost children. Some simply heard our call and knew they belonged here. I saw Lydia there. I recognized her from a photo in her diary. Her skin was pale green now, her hair floating around her like seaweed. She was nursing 2 infants at once, her face serene. She didn't remember me when I spoke to her. She barely remembered her human life at all. There's only now, she said, smiling. Only the children. Isn't it wonderful? I found myself nodding, feeling the pull of it, the simplicity, the purpose. They showed me the older children next, swimming and playing in what looked like schools. They were learning, growing, but in ways no human child could. Some could create light from their hands. Others could speak to the fish and eels that swam alongside them. They need special care, the Kalupalik explained. Human love, human milk, but our abilities, our teaching. Without both, they would die. When I asked where the children came from, she grew quiet. Some are born to us, she finally said. Others come to us when they're lost, abandoned, or in danger. We save them. But I saw the truth in her eyes. They take children. They've been taking them for generations. Yet as I watched the children play, looking happy and healthy, I couldn't summon the horror I should feel. Instead, I felt understanding. Swimming feels natural to me now. My body moves differently in the water, more graceful than I've ever been on land. And I can stay under for nearly 10 minutes without coming up for air. Last night, I noticed small patches of my skin glowing in the dark, a soft blue light that pulses with my heartbeat. When I touched one, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. The Kalupalik told me it's how they soothe the children, how they call to those who need them. My blood looks different when I cut myself by accident, darker, thicker, with a faint glow. I should be terrified by these changes. Instead, I find myself standing in front of the mirror, watching my body transform with a strange fascination. The oldest Kalupalik took me aside today into a private cave glittering with crystals. There she told me the truth. Our species is dying, she said simply. We have lived in these waters for thousands of years, but our numbers dwindle. We cannot reproduce enough to sustain ourselves. So you take human children, I said. Not a question. We save them, she corrected. and we need human mothers to help raise them, to help them transition. But we need more than that now. She placed a webbed hand on my swollen belly. What grows inside you is the future, she said, a true blending of our kinds, a child who will have the best of both worlds. But how? I asked. The water, she said. Our essence is in the water. You've been drinking it, bathing in it. Your body accepted it, prepared itself. Most humans reject it. Their bodies fight the change. But you were made for this. I should be horrified. I should run screaming from this place, call the police, warn everyone. Instead, I found myself stroking my belly, feeling the movement within, feeling a love so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. Will I remember, I asked, my human life, who I was? She touched my face gently. For a while. Then it will fade, like a dream upon waking. This will become your only reality. The children will become your only purpose. I thought that would frighten me, but I felt only peace. This will be my last entry. The journal is almost full, and my hands... It's getting harder to hold a pen. The webbing between my fingers has grown thicker. My nails have hardened into something like claws, not sharp, but strong enough to dig into rock and coral to build homes for the children. They call me brood mother now. I gave birth 3 days ago, underwater, surrounded by the other mothers. The baby, a girl, has my eyes, but her skin is already showing patches of green. She can breathe air or water. She's perfect, but she's not my only child anymore. I care for 27 others now. Some are infants, barely able to swim on their own. Others are older, learning the ways of both worlds. When I'm with them, I can feel their emotions like they're my own. Their hunger becomes my hunger. Their joy becomes my joy. I can love them all at once, completely, in a way that would be impossible for a human mother. The change is almost complete. I can stay underwater indefinitely now. My lungs still work on land, but the air feels too thin, too harsh. Water is where I belong. My skin has a pattern of light that pulses when I sing. The children are drawn to it, calmed by it. I can call them from great distances, guiding them home when they wander too far. The elders taught me how to use my human knowledge to help our community. My background as a social worker makes me good at finding children who need us, the forgotten. The neglected ones, the ones who would slip through human cracks. I know which homes to watch, which families might not notice a child's absence for days. It sounds terrible written down like this, but it feels right. We save them. We give them a better life. Yesterday, I swam to the surface and walked to my cabin. It felt strange being on land again, my movements clumsy, my skin too dry. I gathered the last of my human things, photos of my former life, my ID, the divorce papers. I looked at them and felt nothing, like they belonged to someone else. I'm leaving this journal behind, not hidden, but in plain sight on the kitchen table. The next woman will come soon. The elders have already chosen her, another divorcee, another woman told she could never have children. She'll rent this cabin seeking peace, just like I did, just like Lydia did. She'll find my journal. She'll read about the strange toys in the forest, the women by the lake, the songs at midnight. She'll think it's fiction at first, or the ramblings of a disturbed mind. But then she'll hear the lullabies, she'll find the toys, she'll feel the pull of the water, and we'll be waiting for her. I don't fear this new life. How could I? I've found what humans spend their whole lives searching for: true purpose, complete love, absolute belonging. My children need me, all of them, the ones I've birthed and the ones I've chosen. My memories of being human are fading already. Each day I remember less of that lonely, limited existence. My name, was it Grace? Even that feels distant now, unimportant. The water calls to me, my children call to me. This is who I was always meant to be. If you're reading this, if you found this cabin and this journal, know that we're watching you. We see your loneliness. We feel your emptiness. We know what you need. Come to the lake at midnight. Listen for our song. Look for the pale women. With welcoming arms, we've been waiting for you. We need another mother. The journal ends here. The cabin was found empty 3 weeks later when the landlord came to collect rent. A search party found no trace of Grace Kellerman. Over the next 6 months, 4 children disappeared from nearby counties. Witnesses reported seeing a beautiful woman singing by the water shortly before each disappearance. My name is Michael O'Brien. I used to be Father O'Brien to my parish, but that was before the drinking, before the incidents, before I lost everything that mattered to me. I arrived in this abandoned mining town in the Colorado Rockies with nothing but my worn suitcase, my Bible, and the crushing weight of my failures. The town's been empty for decades, a perfect place for a man seeking to disappear, for a man like me, hoping to find redemption in the silence of these mountains. This will be my hermitage, I whispered to myself as I walked down the empty main street, my boots kicking up dust with each step. The buildings stood like skeletons against the harsh blue sky, windows broken and doors hanging off hinges. But it was the church at the end of the street that caught my eye. Even from a distance, its steeple reached toward heaven like a desperate prayer. I made my way to the church first. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Sunlight streamed through. Holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The pews were still there, though many were broken, and there at the front was the altar, still intact, still sacred. Or so I thought until I got closer. Strange symbols were carved into its wooden surface. Not Christian symbols, nothing I recognized from seminary. These were older somehow, more primal. My fingers traced their edges, and I felt a chill run through me despite the warmth of the day. I wouldn't spend too much time in there if I were you. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Turning, I saw a man in a ranger's uniform standing in the doorway. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, walking toward me. "Name's Jim Collins. I patrol this area. Saw someone heading into town and thought I'd check it out." "Michael O'Brien," I replied, extending my hand. "I'm planning to stay here for a while." Jim's eyebrow raised. "Here? In this ghost town? Why would anyone want to do that?" I didn't tell him the full truth, just said I needed solitude, time to think. He nodded slowly. "Well, it's not technically forbidden, but..." His eyes drifted to the altar and the symbols. "This place has a reputation. Spiritual disturbances, the locals call it. Something happened here decades ago. Something that never made the papers. If you're looking for peace, you might want to try somewhere else. And whatever you do, I'd avoid this church after dark." After he left, I spent the day setting up my living space in what used to be the town's small hotel. 1 room, 1 cot, 1 table. Enough for a man seeking penance. That evening, I decided to ignore the rangers. Warning, I returned to the church with my Bible and a lantern. If there were spiritual disturbances here, then perhaps that's exactly why God had led me to this place. Maybe this was my chance for redemption, to face something beyond myself. As I explored the town more thoroughly, I found religious artifacts scattered throughout the buildings, crosses hanging upside down, rosaries with their beads arranged in strange patterns, prayer books with pages torn out and rearranged. Each discovery made my heart beat faster, but I told myself this was just vandalism, the work of teenagers or treasure hunters who'd passed through over the years. I returned to the church when night fell. Kneeling before the altar, I began to pray. My words echoed in the empty building until they didn't. On the third Our Father, I heard something respond. Voices, soft at first, then growing stronger, chanting from the empty building surrounding the church. I stopped, my blood turning to ice. The chanting continued for 3 more words, then ceased. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. "Is someone there?" Silence answered me. I told myself it was the wind, or my imagination, or maybe just my guilt playing tricks on me. The next morning, I was washing my face in a basin when I glanced up at the window and saw my reflection. But it wasn't me, not exactly. In the glass, I wore different vestments than my simple clothes. Older robes, like those from centuries past. I blinked, and the image was gone. That day, I discovered something else. The small silver cross I always carried began to tarnish when I entered certain buildings, turning black as if burned. When I left, it would slowly return to normal. My nights became restless. I'd wake to the sound of church bells that couldn't possibly be ringing. Sometimes I'd hear singing from the church, beautiful, perfect choir music from a building I knew was empty. On my 5th day, I found a journal wedged behind one of the pews. It belonged to Father Thomas, apparently the last priest who had served here. The final entry described his excitement about delivering a special sermon to the entire town. The handwriting stopped mid-sentence, as if he had been interrupted. The ink pen had dragged across the page, leaving a long, jagged line. What happened to Father Thomas? What happened to his congregation? Where did they all go? That night, as I knelt in prayer again, something changed. When I spoke the words, "Hear our prayer," a chorus of voices responded in perfect Latin, "Exaudi, orationem nostrum." I was no longer alone in this ghost town, and whatever was with me had been waiting for someone like me to arrive. I first saw them during my 2nd week in town. I was kneeling in the church at dawn when the light turned. Strange, not the normal golden sunrise, but a shimmering silver that seemed to pour through the windows like water. That's when they appeared. They looked like angels, at least at first glance. Tall figures with a soft glow about them, dressed in white robes that moved even when there was no breeze. But something was wrong. Their faces were too smooth, like masks. Their smiles never reached their eyes, and when they moved, it wasn't quite right, like watching someone try to copy how humans walk without ever having done it themselves. "We have heard your prayers, Michael," one of them said. Its voice sounded like many voices speaking together. I fell to my knees. My heart raced with a mix of fear and, I'm ashamed to admit, excitement. After years of doubt, of spiritual emptiness, had God finally answered me? Had he sent these messengers to guide me back to faith? "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We are those who answer when true devotion calls," another one said. "We have waited for someone like you to return to this place." Each day after that, they came to me during my prayers, sometimes just one, sometimes many. They never gave names, so in my mind, I began calling them the Not Angels. Not because I didn't believe they were divine, I did, desperately, but because they never quite matched the descriptions from Scripture. They seemed to grow more solid, more present, with each prayer session. And they began to show me things, miracles. I thought they could make the candles light without matches. They brought dead flowers back to bloom. Once, when I cut my hand on a broken window, one of them touched the wound and sealed it without a scar. Strange things began happening in the town. The weather would change suddenly when I prayed, storms clearing or rain falling from clear skies. Birds would gather on the church roof during my sermons I found myself giving to empty pews, as if the congregation was still there, just invisible. And sometimes I swear I heard applause. "They are still here," a Not Angel told me one evening as I stood at the pulpit. "The faithful, they remained after death, and now they listen to you." The idea should have terrified me, but instead it filled me with purpose. I began preaching with more passion than I ever had in my real parish. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, that rush of connection, that spiritual high that comes when you truly believe God is working through you. The Not Angels encouraged this. Your faith feeds us, one told me. I took it as a compliment, that my devotion nourished these divine messengers. Strange things began happening to my body. One morning, I woke to find my palms bleeding. Stigmata, the wounds of Christ. The blood formed perfect circles that didn't hurt and healed by sundown. Another day, I found myself speaking in tongues, languages I'd never studied pouring from my lips during prayer. These experiences left me feeling drained but spiritually alive in a way I hadn't felt since I was a young priest. It was addictive, this feeling of being special, chosen. After my failures, after being cast out of my parish, here I was receiving what seemed like direct divine attention. I didn't notice at first how the Not Angels were changing, how they became more solid each day, how their voices grew stronger, how they could affect more of the physical world around them. One night, as I sat in my small room reading my Bible by lamplight, I felt a presence. Looking up, I saw one of them standing in the corner, watching me. This wasn't normal. They had only appeared in the church before. "You're growing stronger," I said. It smiled that wrong smile. "Because of you, Michael. Your faith gives us form." "What exactly are you?" I finally asked the question that had been growing in my mind. "We are what you need us to be," it said. "We are the answer to your loneliness, the confirmation of your worth, the proof that your life has purpose." I should have been worried by this non-answer, but the words filled me with such warmth that I accepted them. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes seemed brighter. My face looked younger. The gray in my hair had darkened. I felt strong, powerful in a way I never had before, but that afternoon as I walked through town, I noticed something troubling. Wherever the Not Angels had spent time, things were different. Plants had died. Metal had rusted. Wood had rotted. It was as if they were pulling the life from everything around them. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the church, but the pews were full. Men and women in old-fashioned clothes sat perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the altar. As I walked down the aisle, I realized they weren't breathing. They weren't alive, but they weren't exactly dead either. They seemed preserved, like insects in amber. And standing among them were the Not Angels, their hands resting on the shoulders of the seated figures, drawing something invisible from them that made the Not Angels glow brighter. I woke up gasping, covered in sweat. For the first time, I felt afraid of what was happening in this town. I took out my rosary to pray for guidance, but when I touched the beads, they turned black in my hands, crumbling to dust. That's when I knew. Whatever these beings were, they weren't sent from heaven. But by then, they had already sunk their hooks into my soul. The truth came to me on a Sunday morning. I was standing at the altar, performing what had become my regular service. The church was empty, but I could feel them watching, the invisible congregation, the Not Angels hovering near the ceiling beams. As I raised my hands to give the blessing, one of the Not Angels floated down and stood beside me. Its face, which had seemed beautiful before, now looked wrong. Its eyes were too wide, its smile too fixed. "It's time you understood what we truly are," it said. The air in the church grew cold. The sunlight dimmed, though there were no clouds outside. "You are angels," I said, but my voice shook with doubt. The Not Angel laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "We are older than angels. We existed before your God named the stars." Its form shifted, blurring at the edges. The white robes darkened, becoming something like smoke. Its face stretched, features melting and reforming. "We feed on faith, Michael. On devotion, on the energy humans create when they worship." My legs gave out and I fell to my knees, not in prayer this time, but in horror. "You've been using me?" "And you've been using us," it replied. "We give you purpose, importance, the feeling of being chosen. We feed each other. Another not angel appeared beside the first. Show him what we can do, it said. The first not angel touched my forehead. Suddenly I could see, really see, what was happening when I prayed. My words, my faith, my emotion created a kind of light that flowed out of me. The not angels caught this light, absorbed it, grew stronger from it. Every prayer you've said since arriving here has come to us, not to your God, the second one said. We are excellent at redirecting things. I tried to stand, to run, but my body felt heavy, drained. Looking at my hands, I saw they were thinner, the skin looser. My sleeve slid back, revealing an arm that looked like it belonged to a much older man. "What are you doing to me?" I gasped. "Taking what we need," the first not angel said simply. "Your spiritual energy, your life force, the power of your faith." "It's a fair trade," added the second. "We give you religious experiences beyond anything your real faith ever provided." They were right. The spiritual highs I'd felt here, the visions, the sensations of divine presence, were stronger than anything I'd experienced in my decades as a priest. "You're killing me," I said. The not angel shook its head. "Not killing, transforming, like the others." "Others?" It gestured, and the empty pews suddenly weren't empty anymore. I saw them, ghost-like figures of men and women, their faces hollow, their eyes empty. They sat perfectly still, mouths moving in silent prayer. "The congregation never left," the not angel explained. "Father Thomas, the miners, their families, all still here, still praying, still feeding us, for decades." I recognized one face, the man I'd seen in an old photograph in the town records, Father Thomas. But he looked wrong, stretched thin, like a photo left too long in the sun. "What did you do to them?" I whispered. "The same thing we're doing to you, slowly replacing their connection to their God with a connection to us. Their prayers create energy. We take that energy. Eventually they become perfect devotees, forever praying, forever feeding us." I thought of the journal I'd found. Father Thomas interrupted mid-sentence. Had that been the moment they took? Him completely? I tried to pray, a desperate, silent plea for help, but I felt my prayer being intercepted, twisted, redirected to the things standing before me. "Don't bother," the first not angel said. "Your channel to heaven is closed. We've made sure of that." I reached for my cross, but it burned my fingers, now responding to them instead of to true faith. Over the next few days, I tried everything to break free of them. I attempted to leave town, but found myself walking in circles, always returning. To the church. I tried not praying, but the need built up inside me like a thirst until I couldn't resist anymore. Each time I gave in and prayed, I could feel myself growing weaker, older, and the not angels grew more solid. One night, I found a hidden room beneath the church. A small door behind the altar led to stone steps going down into darkness. With shaking hands, I lit a candle and descended. The basement was filled with personal items, watches, wedding rings, lockets with photos, belongings of the congregation, and on the wall, names and dates written in what looked horribly like dried blood. The last date was from 1953, when Father Thomas had disappeared. In the center of the room stood a life-sized wooden statue of a priest. As I moved my candle closer, I gasped. The face was Father Thomas's, every detail perfect, down to a small scar above his eyebrow. But the eyes were alive, moving, following me. "He served us well," said a voice behind me. A not angel had followed me down. "As you will." "What happened to him?" I asked, unable to look away from those living eyes in the wooden face. "He became a vessel, a permanent connection between our realm and yours, a perfect conduit for prayer energy." I backed away from the statue. "I won't let you do that to me." The not angel smiled. "You already are letting us, every time you pray, every time you preach, Every time you feel that rush of false divine connection, I realized with horror that it was right. I was addicted to the spiritual highs they provided. Even knowing what they were, part of me still craved that feeling. You have a choice, Michael, the Not Angel said. Become like the others, empty shells praying for eternity, or become something more. Become like Father Thomas, a prophet for our kind. It extended a hand that was no longer even trying to look human. Long fingers ending in points, skin like wet paper. Help us find more believers, it whispered, and will make you feel divine again. God help me, I was tempted. I'd like to say I refused them, that I found the strength to resist, but the truth is, I was weak. I'd been weak when I turned to alcohol after my crisis of faith. I'd been weak when I showed up drunk to services. And I was weak now, facing these entities that offered me everything I thought I wanted. What would I have to do? I asked, hating the eagerness in my voice. The Not Angel's smile widened. Simply be a priest again. Bring people to us. Share your renewed faith. My bishop defrocked me. I can't just start a new parish. You won't need permission anymore, it said. We can restore your powers, enhance them even, make your words touch hearts like never before. That night, they performed a ceremony. They took me to the altar and had me kneel. 5 of them surrounded me, their forms now barely human. More, like pillars of dark smoke with glowing eyes. They placed their hands on my head, and pain shot through my body. It felt like being turned inside out, like every cell was being rewritten. I screamed, but no sound came out. Instead, I heard their voices inside my mind, whispering promises, instructions, visions. I saw a corrupted version of heaven, a place where these entities ruled, where human souls served as batteries powering their existence. I saw how they had infiltrated religions throughout history, posing as divine messengers, feeding off the energy of worship. When the ceremony ended, I collapsed on the floor. I slept for what felt like days. When I woke, I was different. I could feel it immediately. My body was stronger, younger, my mind clearer, but my soul felt hollow, like a room that's been emptied of furniture. I looked in a mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes had changed color, from brown to a bright, unnatural blue that seemed to glow in dim light. My skin was smooth again, the wrinkles gone. I looked 30 instead of 52, but the biggest change was when I spoke. My voice had a new quality, a resonance that seemed to hang in the air. When I practiced speaking, I found I could make my voice sound trustworthy, comforting, absolutely convincing. Your first task, a Not Angel told me that evening, is to bring us the ranger, Jim Collins, the man who had warned me about this place. He won't come willingly, I said. He will if you ask him properly, the Not Angel replied. Try out your new persuasiveness. I hiked to the ranger station the next day. Jim was surprised to see me, more surprised at how I looked. O'Brien, that you? You look different. I smiled. I found what I was looking for in that town, Jim. Spiritual renewal. I'd like to show you. I could see the suspicion in his eyes, the hesitation. But then I spoke again, putting the new power into my voice. Please, Jim, I've discovered something important, something that could help people. I need your opinion on it. His expression changed. His eyes went slightly unfocused. Well, I suppose I could come take a look. It was that easy. My words bypassed his natural caution, his common sense. They went straight to the part of his brain that wanted to trust, to believe. I led him back to the town, to the church. The Not Angels were waiting, invisible to him, but not to me. I could see them now at all times, dark shapes hovering at the edges of my vision. What exactly did you want to show me? Jim asked as we entered the church. I gestured to the altar. I've been holding services, small ones. I think this place could be restored. Become a spiritual retreat, he frowned. Services? For who? There's nobody here. For the faithful, I said, and again put that power into my voice. Those who need spiritual guidance, like you do, Jim. His frown deepened, but he couldn't look away from me. I'm not religious. Everyone has faith in something, I said softly. Everyone has a hole in their soul that needs filling. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and I could feel something happening, a connection forming. I could sense his doubts, his fears, the spiritual emptiness he carried. Let me help you, I whispered. The Not Angels moved closer, surrounding us. One touched Jim's other shoulder, though he couldn't see or feel it. But I could see the energy starting to flow, from Jim to the entity. What's happening? Jim's voice was slurred, his eyes unfocused. I feel strange. You're experiencing spiritual awakening, I said. The beginning of true faith. Over the next few hours, I spoke to Jim about faith, about purpose, about meaning. My words weren't really mine anymore. They came from the Not Angels through me, but they worked. Jim listened, entranced. By nightfall, he was kneeling at the altar, praying to entities he couldn't see, but now believed in completely. I watched as the Not Angels fed on his devotion, growing stronger, and I felt myself changing further. My connection to them deepened. I could hear their thoughts more clearly, see visions of their realm. But I also felt Jim's life force dimming. He was aging before my eyes, subtle at first, then more rapidly. Grey appeared in his hair. Lines formed around his eyes. Enough, I said to the Not Angels. You're taking too much. This is what we do, one replied in my mind. This is what you agreed to help with. I didn't know it would happen so fast. He is merely the first, a test of your abilities. Soon you will bring us many more. I looked at Jim, now asleep on a pew, looking 10 years older than when he'd arrived. What had I done? What was I becoming? That night, I dreamed of standing before a massive congregation. Thousands of people all looking at me with adoring eyes, all praying, their energy flowing through me to the Not Angels. In the dream, I wasn't just their prophet, I was becoming one of them. I woke up changed again. My skin had a faint glow in darkness. I could move objects without touching them. And worst of all, I could sense people from far away, feel their spiritual energy like distant lights. The Not Angels were pleased. You're progressing faster than Father Thomas did, one told me. Your potential is greater. What happens when the transformation is complete, I asked. You become the bridge, the permanent connection between our realm and yours. Through you, we can reach thousands, millions. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a twisted pride. I was special again, important, needed. When Jim woke, he was completely devoted to me, to us. His eyes had the same emptiness I'd seen in the ghostly congregation. He returned to his ranger station, but I knew he would bring others when I called. He was mine now, the first of many. As the days passed, I felt less and less human. My body was changing, becoming a better conductor for the energy flowing between worshippers and the Not Angels. Food lost its taste. Sleep became unnecessary. My emotions flattened, except for a constant hunger for more devotion, more worship. Soon, the Not Angels promised, you'll be ready to leave this place, to spread our influence, to build our true congregation. God help me, I was eager to begin. 3 months after I first arrived in that abandoned town, I left it behind, but I didn't leave alone. The Not Angels traveled with me, invisible to everyone but me, and Jim Collins drove me in his Ranger truck, his once kind face now blank, his once sharp eyes now dull. He'd aged 20 years in 3 months, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Where are we going, Father? He asked. He called me Father now, though I had no right to the title. To another church, I said, one that needs us. The Not Angels had shown me visions of empty churches across the country, places where faith had dwindled, where spiritual hunger remained unfilled. Perfect feeding grounds. Our first stop was a small church in Wyoming. It had been closed for years, the congregation shrunk to nothing, the building falling apart. We arrived at night. I touched the locked door, and it swung open on its own. Inside, dust covered everything, broken pews, torn hymnals, a cross hanging crooked on the wall. "Perfect," whispered a not angel in my ear. "The remnants of faith linger here, easy to reignite." I spent the night cleaning, preparing. Jim worked silently beside me, needing no rest, no food. In the morning, I stood outside the church and simply called. Not with my voice, but with my new abilities. I sent out a silent summons that reached into the homes of people in the nearby town. People who had once attended this church, people who still carried a spark of faith. They came, one by one. Curious at first, confused about why they felt compelled to visit the old church. But when they saw me, my glowing eyes, my perfect smile, my too young face, their confusion turned to wonder. "Welcome," I said, putting the power into my voice. "I've reopened this church. God has sent me to renew your faith." They believed me instantly. Of course they did. My words bypassed their doubts, their questions, went straight to the part of them that wanted to believe in something bigger than themselves. That first service, I had 12 people. By the next week, 50. Word spread about the miraculous new preacher who could see into your soul, who knew exactly what you needed to hear. I gave them what the not angels taught me to give, a perfect version of faith, one that felt better than the real thing, more intense, more personal. They left each service feeling spiritually fulfilled but physically drained. They didn't notice how they aged a little faster, got sick a little easier. They only knew they couldn't stay away. Within a month, I had converted. The entire town, the not angels, fed richly on their worship, growing stronger than I'd ever seen them. And through them, I grew stronger too. I could do things no human should be able to do, heal with a touch, though it cost years of life from the person I healed. Know people's deepest secrets, though it left them more empty each time I looked. Into their souls. Predict the future, though these were really just visions the not angels showed me to manipulate events in their favor. I built a network. I found others like me, weak, desperate former clergy who had lost their way. I converted them just as I had been converted, taught them to channel worship to the not angels, helped them transform into something beyond human. We established churches in abandoned places across the country, small towns at first, then bigger cities, each of us developing supernatural charisma that made people believe whatever we told them. I didn't look human anymore, not really. I could pass for human at a glance, but there was something wrong about me. My movements were too smooth, my skin too perfect, my eyes too bright. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't feel cold or heat. What I did feel was the constant hunger for worship, for the spiritual energy of believers, and a strange connection to the other false prophets I had created. I could sense them across vast distances, could speak to them with my mind. The not angels revealed more of their plan. They had existed for millennia, feeding on human faith. But they had always been limited, working from the shadows, posing as angels or spirits or gods. Now through me and the others like me, they were building something new, a direct pipeline to human spiritual energy. The old religions are dying, they told me, but spiritual hunger remains. We will fill that void with ourselves. The final stage of my transformation began one night as I stood alone in my church. My skin split open like a cocoon, revealing something smooth and pale underneath. My bones shifted and changed. For hours, I writhed on the floor in agony as my human form was shed completely. When it was over, I could still look human when I wanted to, could wear my old face like a mask. But underneath, I was something else entirely, a perfect conduit between realms, a walking doorway. The Not Angels could now come through me into the physical world more completely than ever before, and the worship energy could flow through me back to their realm more efficiently. In my corrupted state, I began broadcasting my sermons supernaturally. People would hear my voice in their dreams, calling them to worship. My influence spread beyond those who had physically attended my church. It was working perfectly until someone noticed. Reports of too perfect religious experiences began circulating. Stories of congregations where everyone aged rapidly, of preachers with eyes that glowed in the dark. Investigators came, religious authorities, paranormal researchers, government officials. Most of them we converted easily. But some were prepared, protected by genuine faith that our corrupted version couldn't touch. They began tracking our network, shutting down our churches, warning communities about us. But it was too late. We had spread too far. And for every church they closed, we opened 2 more. For every false prophet they identified, we created 5 more. I traveled still, moving between abandoned churches, establishing new congregations of the damned. I can sense faith in others, real faith, and it burns me like acid. But I can also corrupt it, twist it, turn it toward the Not Angels. Sometimes, in quiet moments, a small part of me, the last human part, remembers who I was. Father Michael O'Brien, a flawed priest who only wanted redemption, who only wanted to feel close to God again. Instead, I found these entities, these parasites that mimic divinity. If you're reading this, it means you found my journal. Perhaps in an abandoned church, perhaps in a town where everyone attends services but never seems to leave them quite the same. Be careful, watch for the signs, preachers who seem too perfect, spiritual experiences that feel too good to be true, churches where the congregation ages too quickly. And if you feel a sudden urge to attend a service in a church you've never visited before, if you hear a voice in your dreams calling you to worship, run as far as you can, because we're out there, me and the others like me, the false prophets, the bridges between worlds, the shepherds of the damned, and we're always looking for new members of our congregation. My name is Margaret Kellner, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 42 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a social worker in Chicago. That feels like another lifetime now. After 20 years of seeing the worst of humanity, abused children, broken families, people slipping through the cracks, something in me finally broke. My doctor called it a nervous breakdown. I called it finally facing reality. Then the letter came. My great-aunt Eliza, who I'd met maybe twice in my life, had died and left me her property in the Arkansas Ozarks, 240 acres of dense forest and a farmhouse built in the 1890s. No electricity, no running water, no neighbors for miles. It was either the worst inheritance ever or exactly what I needed. I arrived in late August when the summer heat made the air thick, enough to chew. The little town of Hollow Creek didn't even have a traffic light, just a general store with a gas pump out front. That's where I met Ezra Hutchins, a leathery old man with eyes that had seen too much. "You must be Eliza's niece," he said. Not a question, but a statement as he bagged my supplies. "Taking over the old homestead?" "That's the plan," I told him. "Need to get away from the city for a while." Ezra's hands paused on a can of beans. "Folks don't usually come to these mountains to find something, Miss Kellner. They come to hide from something." His voice dropped lower. "But sometimes what's hiding in these mountains is worse than what you're running from." I laughed, thinking he was trying to scare the city girl. "What, like bears? Wolves?" "Hollow folk," he said, completely serious. "Most think they died out in the 30s during the Depression. Folks who got so hungry they started eating whatever they could find. Then they started eating whoever they could find." He handed me my bags. "Your Aunt Eliza knew about them. Might be worth checking her things before you get too comfortable out there." I thanked him for the supplies and the folklore lesson, thinking it was just a local ghost story to scare tourists. But that night, alone in the creaking farmhouse with only oil lamps for light, I found Eliza's journals. Dozens of them, dating. Back to the 1950s. I opened one from 1972. Third cow found mutilated this month, not bears. The bite marks are human but larger. Sheriff won't come out anymore, says I'm being hysterical. But I saw one of them watching from the tree line yesterday, pale as the moon, eyes like empty wells. It stood perfectly still for 20 minutes before melting back into the forest. I flipped through more entries, finding accounts of missing hikers, strange noises in the night, and repeated mentions of the pale ones who walk at night. A chill ran through me despite the late summer heat. That night, I dreamed I was running through the forest. The moonlight barely filtered through the thick canopy, and my lungs burned with each breath. Behind me, something moved through the underbrush, not crashing like a person would, but flowing like water. I could hear breathing, wet and eager. When I looked back, just for a second, I saw them, gaunt figures with limbs too long, skin stretched tight over bone, and teeth filed to points that gleamed in the darkness. I woke up drenched in sweat, convinced someone was in the house, but the doors were locked, the windows shut. A week later, I met Claude Morrison, my nearest neighbor who lived 3 miles down the dirt road. He was a widower in his 60s who brought me fresh eggs and helped me learn how to maintain the generator. He was kind, but carried a shotgun everywhere he went. "Just respect the forest," he told me, while showing me how to repair the roof. People who've lived here a long time understand there are places you don't go after dark, trails you don't follow, sounds you don't answer. I laughed it off, but Claude didn't smile back. "Your aunt was a smart woman. She survived out here for 40 years because she understood the rules." That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The rain lashed at the windows, and thunder shook the foundation of the old house. I woke just after midnight to complete silence. The storm had passed, but something had pulled me from sleep. A sound, a soft scratching at the window. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly approached the bedroom window. The beam revealed nothing outside but dripping trees. Then I moved to the kitchen and froze. Every window of my house was covered in handprints, skeletal, muddy handprints pressed into the glass from the outside, dozens of them overlapping at every window. With shaking hands, I unlocked the front door and stepped onto the porch. The ground around my house was mud from the rain, but there wasn't a single footprint leading to or away from the building. Whatever had touched my windows hadn't walked there. The next morning, I tried to tell myself the handprints were just a trick of the light or maybe mud splashed up by the storm. But deep down, I knew better. I drove into town and found myself back at Ezra's store, asking questions I didn't want answers to. "The Hollow folk ain't just cannibals," Ezra told me quietly, making sure no other customers were nearby. "Eat enough. Human flesh, and something happens to you. Something from the old Indian legends, the Wendigo spirit. It gets inside you, changes you, makes you faster, stronger, but always hungry, never satisfied." I didn't believe in monsters or spirits, but I had to admit something strange was happening. "How do they, hunt?" I asked. "They can sound like anyone they've eaten," he said. "Perfect mimics, and they can smell fear from miles away, like sharks with blood in the water." When I got back home, I decided to plant a vegetable garden near the house. Keeping busy helped keep the fear at bay, but the next morning I found the entire garden destroyed. The soil was torn up, and all the root vegetables I'd planted were gone. When I looked closer, I saw bite marks in the earth itself, huge, human-like, teeth marks. That's when Claude showed up with his truck full of supplies. He took one look at the garden, and his face went grey. "You need to come stay in town for a while," he said, not looking me in the eye. "I can't just leave," I said. "This is my home now." Claude's eyes met mine. "They're waking up early this year. usually don't get active till late October when food gets scarce. While Claude unloaded supplies, I walked the property line. That's when I found it, a hole in the ground, about 3 feet wide, half hidden under a fallen tree. It wasn't a knee, animal burrow. It was too perfect, too smooth. When I shined my flashlight down, I could see it was a tunnel. I didn't tell Claude about the tunnel. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid he'd insist I leave, or maybe part of me still didn't believe what was happening. That night I had another nightmare. I was crawling through dark, narrow tunnels, the walls slick with something I didn't want to identify. Ahead of me, I could hear voices calling my name, not just one voice, but many, all speaking together in perfect unison. The next day, I found more tunnels. They were everywhere once I knew what to look for. Some were barely big enough for a child to fit through, others large enough for an adult. I followed one of the bigger ones, just a little way in. The walls were hand-carved, with scratch marks from fingernails or claws. It sloped down sharply, and the air coming from inside was cold and smelled like rot. About 20 feet in, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. My flashlight beam caught something white. Bones. Human bones, gnawed clean and stacked in neat piles. I backed out so fast I scraped my shoulders raw against the tunnel walls. Claude was supposed to visit that day with more supplies, but he never showed up. I called his house from my landline, but no answer. As the sun started to set, I got in my car and drove the 3 miles to his farm. His truck was in the driveway. Driver's door open. The seat was soaked with blood. Something had torn through the metal roof of the cab, not cut but torn, like paper. I ran to his house calling his name, but I knew he wouldn't answer. I should have gone to the police then, but something told me they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, maybe they already knew and stayed away on purpose. I drove back to my place in the dark, headlights catching the dense wall of trees on either side of the dirt road. Twice, I thought I saw movement in the woods, something pale and quick, keeping pace with my car. The next morning, I went down to check my root cellar. I needed to inventory my food supply in case I couldn't leave for a while. The cellar door was already open, and hanging from the ceiling beams was Claude, or what was left of him. His body was partially eaten, strung up like a deer carcass. His eyes and tongue were gone. It wasn't just a killing, it was a message, a warning. I threw up, then ran back to the house and locked every door and window. I grabbed Claude's shotgun that he'd left on his last visit. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's when I remembered Aunt Eliza's journals. I dug through them frantically, looking for anything that might help me survive. In her last journal from 1986, I found an entry about the Bone Mother. She was the first, Eliza had written, during the winter of 32, 33, 6 months of snow so deep you couldn't open your door. They say she fed her children her husband first, then when he was gone, she fed them parts of herself. When there was nothing left to give, she fed on them instead. By spring, she wasn't human anymore. The others who followed her path became the hollow folk, but she is their queen, their mother. She is the hunger that never stops. I slammed. The journal shut, feeling sick again. But now I understood. These weren't just local legends or simple cannibals. Whatever was, out there in the woods, whatever had killed Claude and was coming for me next, was something much worse, and it was getting closer. I spent that day boarding up windows and moving furniture against the doors. I brought Claude's shotgun, all my food, water, and Aunt Eliza's journals into the living room. If I was going to make it through this, I needed to understand what I was up against. That afternoon, I found Claude's watch on my front porch, just his watch placed carefully in the center of the welcome mat. I hadn't heard anything outside. The next morning, his glasses were arranged neatly on the kitchen windowsill outside, then his wedding ring on the back step, each item perfectly placed like sick little gifts. They were playing with me. I stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time, When I did sleep, the nightmares got worse. I dreamed of tunnels filled with bones, of pale things with long fingers watching me from the woods. On the fourth night after finding Claude, I heard children laughing outside my house. It was midnight, and the sound of small voices giggling and playing tag made my blood freeze. I knew there were no children within miles of here. I peeked through a crack in the boarded window. In the moonlight, I could see them, 5 or 6 figures moving around my yard. They looked almost human from a distance, but something was wrong with how they moved. Too jerky, too fast. They were playing children's games, but all wrong, like they'd only seen games played from far away and were copying what they saw. Their skin was so pale it almost glowed in the dark, stretched too tight over long bones. I put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. One of them stopped and turned toward the house. Its face was human-shaped but hollow-cheeked, with eyes that seemed to reflect light like an animal's. It smiled, showing rows of sharpened teeth, and waved at my window. It knew exactly where I was looking from. I backed away from the window and huddled in the corner with the shotgun across my lap until morning. When I checked my water well the next day, the water had turned dark and smelled like rot. I lowered a bucket down and pulled up something that might have been a finger. After that, I started collecting rainwater, but there wasn't much. I was getting desperate. That night, they started testing the house. I could hear them trying windows, pushing against the boards, scratching at the door frames. The scratching wasn't like fingernails. It was harder, like bone against wood. They moved around the house for hours, communicating with little clicks and chatters that didn't sound human at all. Around 3 a.m., everything went quiet. Then I heard something heavy land on the roof. Thump, 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 slow, deliberate footsteps crossing above me. The thing on the roof stopped right above where I was sitting. I heard a strange sniffing sound, like it was smelling me through. The ceiling. Then a voice, a horrible voice that sounded like many people talking at once, called my name. "Margaret," it said. "Maggie, we know you're alone." I didn't answer. I couldn't. "We can smell your fear, Maggie," the voice continued. "It's delicious. Your friend Claude was tough, but you'll be tender." Something sharp scraped across the roof, peeling away shingles. "You're sitting in the living room, in the corner, with a shotgun," the voice said. "That won't help you. Nothing will help you." I fired the shotgun at the ceiling. There was a shriek, not of pain, but of delight, like I'd done exactly what they wanted. Then silence again. In the morning, I found half the roof shingles torn off. And now I knew what I was dealing with. They could smell me, hear my heartbeat, knew exactly where I was in the house at all times. I went back to Aunt Eliza's journals and found an entry from 1962. They can't stand the summer heat. They hibernate from May to September most years, living in their tunnels. But as fall comes and the air cools, they grow active. By winter, they're ravenous. That's why they took the Miller family in January of '61, not just for food, but to build their numbers before spring. This explained why they were attacking now in late September, and it meant things would only get worse as it got colder. That night, I saw her for the first time, the Bone Mother. I was dozing off when a sharp tap at my window jolted me awake. Standing outside, illuminated by moonlight, was the tallest, thinnest person I'd ever seen. She had to be 7 feet tall, but so skinny that her skin looked vacuum-sealed to her bones. Her arms and fingers were too long, her face stretched into a permanent hungry smile with teeth filed to points. Her skin was yellowish like old paper, and her eyes reflected the moonlight like mirrors. She pressed her face against the glass and opened her mouth wider than any human could, unhinging her jaw like a snake. Her teeth gleamed. I scrambled back, knocking over a lamp. When I looked again, she was gone, but I knew she'd be back. The next day, they started taking the house apart. I heard them on the roof again, this time ripping off whole sections of shingles. They pulled off siding and shutters with their bare hands. They were dismantling my shelter piece by piece. I realized I couldn't stay. That night, while they were busy tearing at the roof, I snuck down to the root cellar. Claude's body was gone now, taken back into their tunnels, I guessed. I planned to hide there until daylight, then make a run for my car. But as I sat in the dark cellar, I heard something worse than anything before, digging. They were tunneling toward me, through the earth itself. I could hear them moving through dirt faster than should be possible, getting closer by the second. I pressed myself against the cellar door, listening to the scratching getting louder and louder. Then it stopped. In the silence, I heard breathing on the other side of the dirt wall. Then a voice, Claude's voice, perfectly mimicked, called out, "Maggie, help me, Maggie, I'm hurt, but I'm alive, dig me out." I bit my knuckles to keep from answering. It wasn't Claude. Claude was dead. Another voice joined in, a child's voice. "Mommy, I'm scared in here. It's dark." Then more voices, dozens overlapping, all calling to me, begging for help. The hollow folk had found me, and they were hungry. I burst out of the cellar and ran for the woods. I know it sounds crazy, running into the dark forest with those things out there. But the house wasn't safe anymore. Nothing was safe. The night air was cold on my skin as I crashed through the underbrush. Behind me, I heard them emerging from the ground, their clicking sounds and horrible chittering filling the darkness. I had no plan except to keep moving. The moon was full, but as I ran deeper into the forest, a strange fog began to rise from the ground. It wasn't natural, too thick, too purposeful. Soon I could barely see 10 feet ahead of me. I was lost. The fog seemed to swallow sound too. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps anymore, just my ragged breathing and pounding heart. That's when I stumbled into the clearing. The fog parted just enough to reveal an old mining camp, a collection of rotting wooden shacks arranged in a circle. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Signs of desperate poverty were everywhere. Rusted tin cans, broken tools, tattered clothing frozen in time. This had to be where it all started. The winter of 1932 to 33, when the Depression was at its worst and the snow trapped families in these mountains for months. I ducked into the largest shack, hoping to hide until daylight. Inside, I found a nightmare. The walls were covered with scratch marks, not angry ones, but neat tallies. Hundreds of them, recording the days of that endless winter. In the center of the room was a large fire pit, filled with what I first thought was ash. Looking closer, I realized it was bone ash. Human bones, burned to dust. Around the pit, arranged in a circle like some kind of shrine, were mummified human remains. 7 bodies, dried and preserved by the mountain air, positioned as if they were still sitting around the fire. They wore tattered clothes from the 1930s. Their faces were frozen in expressions of hunger and pain. These were the first victims, or maybe the first transformations. The original hollow folk. I heard something outside and pressed myself into a dark corner. Through cracks in the walls, I saw figures moving through the fog. They were searching for me, sniffing the air like hunting dogs. Then I saw her again, the Bone Mother. She walked into the center of the camp, her movements jerky but purposeful. The others gathered around her like children around a parent. She raised her head and spoke. What came out of her mouth was the most horrible sound I've ever heard. It was dozens of voices speaking at once, men, women, children, all talking over each other, begging, pleading, screaming, the voices of everyone she had consumed over the decades. "Maggie Kellner," the voices said in terrible unison. "We knew you would come to us. Your aunt sent you." I covered my ears, but the voices seemed to bypass them, vibrating directly in my skull. "You're perfect," they continued. "Alone, broken, no one looking for you, no one to miss you, just like all the others." That's when I realized this wasn't random. My great-aunt hadn't died naturally. She had been their victim. And now they had arranged for me to inherit the property. They had been planning this for months, waiting for fresh prey. I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion, because suddenly I was dreaming. But these weren't ordinary dreams. I was seeing through other people's eyes, people being chased through these same woods, people being dragged into tunnels, people being eaten. I was experiencing the memories of the Hollow Folk's victims. When I jolted awake, dawn was breaking. The fog was lifting, and with it, the presence of the creatures. They were gone for now. In the daylight, I examined the mining camp more carefully. There was something odd about how the mummified bodies were arranged. They weren't just sitting around the fire pit. They were positioned to form a pattern, a symbol etched into the dirt floor. I also noticed something I'd missed in the dark. The creatures had left deep footprints in the muddy ground as they searched for me. But where the early morning sunlight touched these footprints, the mud was bubbling and smoking, as if the light itself was burning it. That's when I realized they couldn't stand direct sunlight. That's why they lived in tunnels, why they only came out at night. I had a weapon now, daylight, but it was already late September and the days were getting shorter. Soon winter would come with its long nights. I had to find a way to escape before then. I made my way back to the house, following the sun as it rose higher. The Hollow Folk had done even more damage overnight. Half the roof was gone, and most of the windows were broken. But my car was still there. The keys were inside the house. I took a deep breath and went in. The place had been torn apart. Furniture was smashed, walls were clawed open. But they had been thorough in their destruction. They'd searched every drawer, every hiding place, as if they were looking for something specific. I found my keys under the rubble of what had been my bedside table. As I picked them up, I noticed something glinting in the debris. A small hand mirror. I grabbed it too, an idea forming in my mind. That night, I prepared myself. I collected every mirror and reflective surface I could find. Compact mirrors from my purse, a metal baking sheet from the kitchen, aluminum foil, even the side mirrors from my car. I arranged them around my bedroom to catch and reflect the moonlight. It wasn't much, but it might buy me time. If sunlight hurt them, maybe concentrated moonlight would at least slow them down. Just after midnight they returned. I heard them first. That awful chittering sound as they emerged from their tunnels, then scratching at the walls of the house. They were being more direct now, less playful. They were hungry and tired of waiting. I crouched in my bedroom, surrounded by my pathetic array of mirrors. The moonlight created small pools of light around the room, not strong, but better than complete darkness. The scratching stopped. Then I heard heavy footsteps on the porch, followed by the front door creaking open. She was in the house, the Bone Mother. "Maggie!" the chorus of voices called. "We've been so patient, but we're hungry now." I heard her moving through the house, coming closer to the bedroom. I gripped Claude's shotgun, knowing it wouldn't do much good, but needing something to hold on to. The bedroom door swung open slowly. The Bone Mother had to duck to enter the room. Up close, she was even more terrifying, her skin so tight against her skull that it looked like a yellow mask stretched over bone. Her eyes were milky, but somehow still reflecting the light. Her mouth was permanently fixed in that hungry smile. But what hit me hardest was the smell, like rotting meat and stale earth. "You have a choice, Maggie," the voices said from her mouth. "Join us or feed us." Join them? What did that mean? "The hunger can be shared," she continued, taking a step into the room. "It can be given. The transformation is painful, but then you'll never be alone again. You'll be part of us. Or you can die screaming like your friend Claude." She was offering to turn me into one of them, a Hollow Folk, a Wendigo. I backed away, bumping into my arrangement of mirrors. One fell, catching the moonlight and sending a beam across the Bone Mother's arm. Where it touched, her skin sizzled slightly. She hissed and pulled back. It worked, not as well as sunlight would, but it hurt her. "I'd rather die," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That can be arranged," she said, and lunged for me. I dove to the side as the Bone Mother's long fingers grasped at the air where I'd been standing. I kicked over my arrangement of mirrors, sending beams of moonlight bouncing around the room. Wherever they touched her, her skin smoked and she shrieked, not in pain, but in anger. I scrambled under the bed and rolled out the other side, making a break for the door. In the hallway, I could hear more of them entering the house, their bony feet clicking on the wooden floors. The Bone Mother followed me, moving in that strange, jerky way, like her joints worked differently than a human's. I ran for the back door, but two more hollow folk were there waiting. Their sunken eyes glowed in the dark, and their mouths opened too wide when they saw me. I was trapped. Then I remembered the tunnels. They were everywhere under the property. And they had to lead somewhere, maybe to a way out. I ran for the root cellar, the creatures right behind me. Their breathing was wet and eager, their clicking sounds getting more excited as they closed in. I could feel their hunger like a physical thing pressing against my back. I threw open the cellar door and jumped down the steps, landing hard on the dirt floor. In the corner, I could see where they had started to dig through, a tunnel about 3 feet wide. Without thinking, I dove into it. Behind me, I heard them following, their bodies scraping against the narrow walls. The tunnel sloped down sharply, and soon I was sliding more than crawling, the damp earth cold against my hands and knees. The tunnel opened into a larger one, tall enough to crouch in. I could hear the creatures behind me, but also movement ahead. They were all around me now, in their underground maze. I kept moving, choosing tunnels at random, hoping to find a way out or at least to confuse them. The air grew colder and damper the deeper I went. The smell of rot got stronger. Then I entered a large chamber and froze. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness enough to see the horror around me. Bodies, dozens of them in various stages of being eaten. Some were just bones, others still had flesh, and a few, oh God, a few were still alive. I could see their eyes moving, following me, but they couldn't speak or move. They just watched as I stood there, trembling. "They're saved for winter," said the voice of the Bone Mother behind me. "When food gets scarce." I whirled around. She filled the entrance to the chamber, her long body blocking any escape. Behind her I could see more hollow folk gathering, their pale forms crowding the tunnel. "You've seen our home now," she said. "Few living humans have. Aren't you honored?" "Why are you doing this?" I asked, backing away. "Why me?" "Why not you?" the voices answered. "You're perfect, no connections, no one to miss you, damaged inside. Already, the transformation will be easier for you than most. Transformation, to become like us, to join the family." The Bone Mother took a step closer. The hunger chose us first, in that terrible winter. We had no choice but to eat or die. But now we choose who joins us. I bumped into something soft behind me and spun around. It was one of the living victims, a man, maybe in his 30s. His eyes widened when I touched him, but he couldn't move or speak. Just blink. Tears ran down his face. "Help them," he seemed to be saying with his eyes. "End this. You can. Save them, you know," the Bone Mother said, as if reading my thoughts. "If you destroy what's left of us, the original 7, at the mining camp, burn them completely, it would break the curse." I stared at her. "Why would you tell me that? Why would you want the curse broken?" The Bone Mother's stretched lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Who said we want it broken? We've existed this way for almost 100 years. The hunger is eternal now." I realized then she was playing with me. They all were, leading me towards some end I couldn't see yet. "If I destroyed the remains, what would happen to you? To all of you?" I asked. "We would be freed," she said, simply, "one way or another." One of the living victims made a muffled sound behind me. I turned to look at him again, and his eyes were desperate, pleading. He wanted to die. They all did. The Bone Mother took another step toward me. But you won't live to try. You'll join us or feed us. That's all. In that moment, I made my choice. I lunged forward, ducking under her outstretched arms, and dove into a side tunnel I'd spotted. Behind me, the chamber erupted with shrieks and chittering sounds as the hollow folk gave chase. The tunnel was tight, barely big enough for me to squeeze through. But the hollow folk were skeletally thin. They could follow me anywhere. I crawled frantically, taking every fork and turn I could find, trying to work my way upward. I had to reach the surface, reach daylight. It was my only chance. Behind me, I could hear them getting closer, their bodies scraping against the tunnel, walls. The Bone Mother's voice echoed through the earth. "We can smell your fear, Maggie. We can taste it already." After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I saw a faint light ahead. A way out. I scrambled toward it and emerged into the pre-dawn forest. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. Not full daylight yet, but getting there. I ran toward the mining camp. If what the Bone Mother said was true, if destroying, the original remains would break the curse. I had to try, not to save myself, but to end this horror for good. I reached the camp as the first rays of sunlight broke over the mountains. The mummified bodies were still there, arranged around the fire pit in their gruesome circle. I heard movement in the trees. The hollow folk were coming, racing against the rising sun. I grabbed a rotting wooden beam from one of the shacks and smashed it against a rock until it broke into pieces. Then I piled the wood in the fire pit, right in the center of the circle of bodies. The creatures emerged from the tree line, moving, fast, but staying in the shadows. The Bone Mother led them, her impossibly tall form hunched to avoid the growing light. "It won't save you," she called. "Nothing will save you." I found matches in my pocket. I'd grabbed them from the house before. Fleeing, as the creatures circled the camp, staying in the shadows, I struck a match and dropped it on the wood. The dry timber caught immediately. I grabbed more wood, feeding the growing fire. The flames rose higher, and I began dragging the mummified bodies into the blaze one by one. The hollow folk shrieked and charged forward, but the strengthening sunlight held them at the edges of the clearing. Where the light touched them, their skin smoked and blistered. They retreated to the shadows, watching with their glowing eyes, as I destroyed their origins. As the last body hit the flames, the Bone Mother let out a scream that shook the trees. It wasn't just her voice this time. It was every voice, every victim, screaming all at once. The sound was so loud and terrible that I fell to my knees, covering my ears. The forest erupted with movement as animals fled in all directions. Deer, foxes, birds, everything trying to escape that awful sound. The hollow folk began to convulse, their bodies contorting in impossible ways. The Bone Mother fell forward onto all fours, her spine cracking and reforming as she thrashed on the ground. One by one, they collapsed. And then, before my eyes, they began to rot. It was like watching a time-lapse of decomposition. Their yellowish skin darkened and sank into their bones. Their eyes clouded over and dissolved. In minutes, they were nothing but decades-old corpses, returning to the state they should have been in if nature had been allowed to take its course. I watched until they were nothing but bones and rags, then turned back to the fire. I fed it until there was nothing left of the original 7 but ash. Then I sat there until full daylight, making sure it was really over. It took me hours to find my way back to the house. Every step was painful. I had cuts and bruises all over, and I was so tired I could barely stand. When I finally reached the clearing where the house stood, I saw that it was barely standing. The hollow folk had nearly torn it apart. Over the next few days, I gathered what I could salvage and burned the rest, including the house itself. I didn't want any trace of what happened to remain. No evidence to draw curious investigators or would-be ghost hunters. no shelter for any other creatures that might still be hiding in these mountains. I called the Forestry Service and reported finding a large network of bear caves under my property. They closed the area to public access, putting up warnings about dangerous wildlife. I never told anyone what really happened. Who would believe me? I went back to Chicago, back to my old apartment and my old life, but I couldn't readjust. The city felt too crowded, too loud, too bright. I jumped at shadows and couldn't sleep. Without every light on, I started researching, looking for similar stories, similar patterns, and I found them all across Appalachia, the Ozarks, isolated communities in the Pacific Northwest, stories of hollow folk, hungry ones, long people, different names, same horror. Sometimes I dream about them still, about the Bone Mother and her children hunting through the forest, about the victims in the tunnels, alive but unable to move or scream, about Claude, strung up in my cellar like a warning. And sometimes, when I catch myself in the mirror, I see something different in my eyes, something hungry, and I wonder if maybe the Bone Mother got what she wanted after all. Because the hunger never really leaves you once you've felt it. It just sleeps, waiting for the long winter to come again. My name is Vincent Ramirez, but everyone just calls me Vince. I'm 34 years old and spent 3 years in Vietnam as a Marine sniper before coming back home in '71. Coming back wasn't easy. The noises, the people, the questions, it was all too much. The nightmares wouldn't stop, and I couldn't stand being around crowds anymore. I needed to get away from it all. That's why I bought this land, 160 acres of pure wilderness near Mammoth Creek, Montana. No electricity, no phones, no neighbors for miles. Just me, the mountains, and enough space to finally breathe again. I paid cash with my military savings. The real estate guy thought I was crazy, buying land so far from everything, especially with winter coming. But that's exactly what I wanted, to be left alone. I built my cabin by hand, log by log. Took me almost a year, working from sunrise to sunset. Nothing fancy, but sturdy enough to handle Montana winters. 2 rooms, a wood stove, and windows facing each direction so I could see anything coming. I dug a well, planted gardens for vegetables, built pens for chickens and goats, and set up hidden supply caches all over my property. If the world ended tomorrow, I'd be just fine up here. Kaiser, my German shepherd, was my only company. He was a good dog, smart, loyal, and had better ears than me. We settled into a simple life, hunting, chopping wood, tending to the animals. For the first time since Vietnam, I slept through most nights. Then, one day in early fall, I had a visitor. I was splitting firewood when Kaiser started barking. An old Native American man was walking up the path to my cabin. He introduced himself as Joseph Running Bear from the Blackfeet tribe. I wasn't happy about someone finding my place, but I offered him coffee anyway. "You shouldn't be up here alone, especially not with winter coming," he told me, his weathered face serious as he sipped from my tin cup. "Being alone is why I'm here," I answered. He shook his head slowly. "These mountains have spirits, old ones. The elders call them stick Indians, not real Indians, you understand, but something else, something hungry that hunts in the deep winter." I nodded politely, but inside I was rolling my eyes. I'd seen real horror in Vietnam. Ghost stories didn't scare me anymore. "They mimic voices," Running Bear continued, "voices of people you love, to lure you into the dark. If you hear someone calling at night, don't answer, don't follow." He left me a small leather pouch of tobacco and herbs before heading back down the mountain. I tossed the pouch in a drawer and forgot about it. Had bigger things to worry about, like getting ready for winter. November came early that year. The first storm dropped 3 feet of snow overnight, and more kept coming. Soon, the path down to town was completely blocked. I was snowed in, but I had everything I needed, or so I thought. It started with the chickens. One morning I found them all dead, arranged in a perfect circle with their hearts cut out. No blood anywhere, like they'd been drained. 2 days later, the same thing happened to my goats. No tracks in the snow, no signs of wolves or mountain lions, just those perfect circles of dead animals missing their hearts. Kaiser wouldn't stop, growling at the tree line north of the cabin. His fur would stand up, and he'd bare his teeth at nothing I could see. Even inside the cabin at night, he'd stare at the walls like he could hear something moving outside. That's when I started to wonder if maybe Running Bear's warning wasn't just an old man's superstition after all. It happened 3 nights after finding my goats dead. I was asleep when something woke me up. A voice calling my name from outside. "Vince! Vince, help me, I'm hurt." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. It was my brother Mike's voice. But that couldn't be right. Mike died in Vietnam 5 years ago. "Vince, please, I'm cold. Let me in." The voice was coming from the forest. I grabbed my rifle and a flashlight, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside. The night was silent except for that voice still calling me. Snow was falling in big, soft flakes. "Mike!" I called out, knowing it couldn't be him. "Over here, Vince. Follow my voice." I started walking toward the trees. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't stop. It was like I was in a trance, moving without wanting to. I'd gone about 200 yards from my cabin when Kaiser's barking snapped me out of it. He was going crazy back at the cabin, howling and barking like he was fighting for his life. I turned and ran back. When I reached the cabin, Kaiser was at the window, teeth bared at the darkness behind me. I looked back at the forest, but the voice was gone. The next morning, I checked the area where I'd heard the voice. What I found made my blood run cold. There were tracks in the snow, but not human. Tracks, not exactly. They were about 18 inches long, with toes that looked more like fingers. Long, skinny fingers that dug deep into the snow. The tracks led to a pine tree that had been stripped of its bark in a spiral pattern going up about 15 feet. I followed the tracks further into the forest until they just stopped, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. I'm not ashamed to say I ran back to my cabin and spent the day boarding up windows and checking my guns. For the next week, I slept with my rifle across my lap. Each night, I'd hear voices outside, sometimes Mike, sometimes my old war buddies, always calling for help, always trying to get me to come outside. I started to notice other things too. My bullets would disappear, or I'd find my hunting knife on the kitchen table when I was sure I'd left it by the door. One night the voice changed. It was my mother, crying. "Vincent, please let me in. I'm freezing out here." It sounded so real that I almost opened the door before remembering my mother had died of cancer in '69. I'd been at her bedside when she passed. This thing, whatever it was using my memories against me. The next morning, Kaiser was gone. I searched everywhere, calling until my voice was hoarse. I found him at sunset, hanging upside down from a pine tree at the edge of my property. His throat had been cut and his insides were gone. Below him, his blood had been used to draw strange symbols in the snow. When I looked at them directly, they seemed to move and twist, making my head hurt. That night I tore apart my cabin, looking for anything that might help me understand what was happening. Behind a loose board in the wall, I found a stack of old leather journals. They belonged to miners who had lived in my cabin back in 1923. I stayed up all night reading them by lamplight. The miners had disturbed some old Native American burial grounds while digging. After that, they started experiencing the same things I was. Voices, animals killed in circles, strange tracks in the snow. They called it the Stick Indian, just like Running Bear had. According to the journals, the Stick Indian was some kind of ancient spirit that fed on fear. It would study its victims, learn their weaknesses, then use their worst memories to terrorize them. The last entry was a shaky scrawl that just said, "It's wearing Tommy's face tonight, but its shadow shows what it really is." God help us all. I didn't find out what happened to the miners, but I had a pretty good guess. And now, the same thing was happening to me. The miners' journals told me more about the Stick Indian. It didn't just kill for food, it fed on fear and sadness. The more scared its victims were, the stronger it got. And the only way to stop it for good was to burn its real body, which was hidden somewhere in the forest. But how do you find something that can look like anyone it wants? The next night, I heard a knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Tommy Martinez standing there, bloody and limping. Tommy was my best friend in Vietnam. We'd saved each other's lives more times than I could count. Vince, I'm hit bad. Please, man, help me. It looked exactly like Tommy. Same face, same voice. Even the scar above his right eye from a bar fight in Saigon. But when I looked at his shadow, on the snow it wasn't human. It was tall and thin, with too many joints, like a giant insect standing on its hind legs. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold my rifle. The thing wearing Tommy's face started banging on the door, screaming for help. It went on for hours before it finally stopped. The next morning, I found my water. Barrel filled with black, oily stuff that smelled like rotten eggs. When I tried to clean it out, my hands started burning, and I saw things that weren't there. Bugs crawling under my skin, the walls bleeding. I had to melt snow for drinking after that. My cabin got colder each day, even with the fire going full blast. I could see my breath inside, and frost formed on the inside of the windows. It felt like all the heat was being sucked out of the air. One night, I woke up to voices, not just one, but dozens. It sounded like my entire platoon from Vietnam was outside, calling my name, begging me to join them. When I peeked out the window, I saw shadowy figures moving just beyond the reach of my porch light. They looked like men, but they moved wrong, too smooth, like they were floating instead of walking. I knew I had to get help. The thing was getting stronger, and I was getting weaker. I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time in days. I packed a bag with food and supplies, grabbed my rifle, and headed out toward town. The snow was waist-deep in places, but I pushed on. After walking for what felt like hours, I realized something was wrong. The same twisted pine tree kept appearing ahead of me, no matter which way I turned. The forest was changing around me, leading me in circles. When a blizzard blew in, cutting visibility to nothing, I had no choice but to turn back. On my way to the cabin, I found a narrow crack in the rocks I'd never noticed before. It was just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Inside was a cave, and what I saw there nearly stopped my heart. Bodies, dozens of them. Some looked fresh, others were just bones. All had been arranged in perfect circles, just like my animals. Some were miners, judging by their old-fashioned clothes. Others wore hunting gear. There were even remains that looked ancient, wrapped in decayed leather with arrowheads and stone tools nearby. This thing had been hunting here for hundreds of years. As I backed out of the cave, I heard a sound behind me. A wet, clicking noise, like someone snapping twigs underwater. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw it. The real thing, not wearing someone else's face. It was tall, maybe 12 feet, and impossibly thin, like a person stretched on a rack. Its skin looked like tree bark, cracked and peeling. Where its eyes should have been were just empty sockets that leaked black goo like sap. Its fingers were long, too long, ending in sharp points that looked like bone. It tilted its head, studying me like a bird might study a worm. Then it opened what I guess was its mouth, a jagged split in the lower part of its face, and made that clicking sound again. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to my cabin. I just remember slamming the door behind me and shoving a bookcase. In front of it, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. That night, the Stick Indian came for me. I was sitting with my back against the door, rifle in my lap, when I heard it, a scratching sound from above. Then a loud thump, like something heavy landing on my roof. Dust fell from the ceiling as whatever it was moved across the cabin. The scratching stopped right above me. Then came a new sound, wood splintering. Long, thin fingers with sharp bone tips pushed through my ceiling, clawing at the wood, making the hole bigger. I fired my rifle straight up. The thing shrieked. Sound so high and loud it hurt my ears. The fingers disappeared. For a minute I thought I'd scared it away. Then the whole cabin shook as something heavy hit the wall. The thing was inside before I could even turn around. It moved like a spider, crawling across my wall and ceiling, leaving deep scratches in the wood. In the lamplight, it looked even worse than it had in the cave. All twisted limbs and bark-like skin, with that black ooze dripping from its eye sockets. I emptied my rifle at it, but the bullets just seemed to pass through, like shooting at smoke. It dropped to the floor in front of me, reaching out with those long, bony fingers. Then I remembered the pouch Running Bear had given me. I grabbed it from the drawer and dumped the contents into my palm, some kind of herb mixture and tobacco. Acting on instinct, I sprinkled some onto my last bullet, reloaded, and fired. This time, the bullet hit something solid. The creature screamed, a sound so piercing it shattered every window in my cabin. It crashed through the door and disappeared into the night, leaving a trail of black ooze in the snow. I'd hurt it, but I knew it would be back. And it would be. Angry, the next 3 days were hell. The thing sent animals after me, wolves, coyotes, even a mountain lion. They came in waves, throwing themselves at my cabin, trying to get in through the broken windows and doors. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and they moved together like they were being controlled by a single mind. I shot as many as I could, but they just kept coming. Between attacks, I read more of the miners' journals, searching for anything that might help me. That's when I discovered the creature's weakness. It couldn't cross running water. That explained why it had trapped me during winter when Mammoth Creek was frozen solid. I tried to reach the creek, thinking I could break through the ice to create a barrier between me and the thing. I took an axe and started digging through the ice, but a storm appeared out of nowhere. Not a natural storm, but a swirling wall of snow so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The temperature dropped so fast, my eyelashes froze. I barely made it back to the cabin alive. That night, I had the strangest encounter yet. I woke up to find myself standing in my cabin, looking at myself asleep in bed. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Then the me in the bed opened his eyes and smiled. "You're already dead, Vince," it said in my voice. "You died in Vietnam with the rest of your platoon. This is your punishment for surviving when they didn't." I knew it was the Stick Indian, trying to break my mind. But for a moment a horrible doubt crept in. What if it was telling the truth? What if none of this was real? I shook the thought away. "You're lying," I said. "You're just a thing that feeds on fear." The fake me laughed and faded away like mist, but the damage was done. Seeds of doubt had been planted in my mind, and they grew with each passing hour. I was getting weaker. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than a few minutes, or eaten a proper meal. My supplies were running low, and I was starting to see things that weren't there. Shadows moving in corners, blood dripping from walls. The miners' journals mentioned the creature's true name, a word so old it predated human language. According to the journals, speaking the name would weaken the Stick Indian temporarily, but also make it furious. I memorized the strange collection of sounds, not even sure if my human mouth could pronounce them correctly. One night, I saw my shadow move by itself. At first, I thought it was a trick of the lamplight. Then my shadow lifted its hands to my throat, and I felt invisible fingers squeezing my neck. I fought against nothing, gasping for air as my own shadow tried to strangle me. In desperation, I choked out the creature's name from the journal. The pressure on my throat disappeared instantly. My shadow snapped back to normal, but from outside came a sound of pure rage, trees cracking, rocks shattering. The Stick Indian wasn't just angry now, it was coming to end this. once and for all. The next morning I heard someone trudging through the snow toward my cabin. I raised my rifle, ready to shoot anything that moved. But it was Joseph Running Bear, the old Blackfeet man who had warned me months ago. He was on snowshoes, carrying a leather bag. "I felt it," he said when I let him in. "The old evil is awake again." I told him everything that had happened. He nodded gravely and opened his bag, taking out herbs, feathers, and small bundles of sticks wrapped in leather. "These will help, but they won't stop it," he said. "The stick Indian is too strong now. It has fed well." Running Bear was setting up his protective charms around my cabin when we heard a child's voice outside. "Grandfather, grandfather, help me!" Running Bear froze. "My granddaughter," he whispered. Then his eyes widened in horror. "But she's at home, miles from here." Before I could stop him, he rushed outside. I ran after him, but it was too late. Something moved in the trees, just a blur of motion, and Running Bear was gone. I searched for hours, but found no sign of him until sunset. What I found then will haunt me forever. Running Bear had been skinned alive and tied to a tree like a scarecrow. Around him, all his protective charms had been arranged in a mocking circle. The snow beneath him was black with his blood. That night, the voices outside changed. Now Running Bear's voice joined the chorus, speaking in his native language. I didn't understand the words, but they filled me with dread. The thing was using his knowledge against me, twisting sacred Blackfeet prayers into something evil. I spent that night checking my supplies and making a plan. I had come to Montana with more than just hunting rifles. In Vietnam, I'd learned about explosives, and I'd brought some military-grade stuff with me when I left the service. Don't ask me why. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need it someday. Over the next 2 days, I rigged my entire property with explosives under the snow in the trees around the cabin. If I couldn't escape, I'd take the thing with me when I went. From the journals, I had learned one more important thing. The stick Indian was bound to the old burial grounds the miners had disturbed. It couldn't follow victims beyond a 5-mile radius from that spot. If I could somehow get past that boundary, I might survive. But first I had to deal with the creature. On the 7th night after Running Bear's death, I heard a new voice, one that nearly broke me. "Vinny, it's me. It's Sarah." Sarah was my little sister. She died when she was 7 and I was 12. Leukemia. I had promised her I'd never let anything bad happen to her, but in the end, I couldn't save her. "I'm scared, Vinny. Please help me. It's dark out here." Her voice was exactly as I remembered, small and sweet with that little lisp from her missing front teeth. I felt tears running down my face. "You're not her," I said, my voice breaking. "You're not Sarah." "But I am. Don't you recognize me? Mom and Dad said you'd help me. They're waiting too." For a moment, I almost believed it. I wanted to believe it. But then the voice changed, becoming older, colder. "When I'm done with you," it said, "I'll find the rest of your family. Your aunt in Seattle, your cousins in Portland. I can see their faces in your memories. I'll wear your skin when I hunt them." That was when I knew what I had to do. The thing fed on fear and pain. So I would give it what it wanted. I would let it think it had won. I opened my door and stepped outside into the snow. "I give up," I called out. "You win. Take me if you want." For a long minute, nothing happened. Then the air in front of me shimmered, and the stick Indian appeared in its true form, tall, thin, and horrible. It reached for me with those long, bony fingers. I had one last trick up my sleeve, literally. In my sleeve was a military thermite grenade, the kind that burns hot enough to melt metal. As the creature's cold fingers touched my face, I pulled the pin. "See you in hell," I whispered. The explosion was like a miniature sun. The creature and I were both engulfed in white-hot flames. Its scream was like nothing I'd ever heard. It seemed to come from inside my own head, a psychic howl of rage and pain. The The thermite set off my other explosives. The whole forest around us erupted in flames. Trees exploded, snow vaporized instantly, and the ground shook. The last thing I remember is a wall of fire racing toward me, and then darkness. I should have died. Maybe part of me did. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 weeks later. Most of my body was covered in burns. The doctors said a forest fire had started in the mountains, and firefighters had found me unconscious at the edge of the blaze. They called it a miracle that I was alive. When I was strong enough to talk, 2 men in suits came to my room. They said they were from the State Fire Investigation Unit, but their badges looked federal to me. They wanted to know what happened. At Mammoth Creek, I told them everything. The stick Indian, the voices, Running Bear, the cave full of bodies, all of it. They exchanged looks while I talked. The kind of looks people give when they think you're crazy. But then one of them mentioned something I hadn't told them, about symbols drawn in blood they'd found at the site. The other one quickly shut him up. They left. And the next day I was transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Helena. The doctors there said I was suffering from PTSD from Vietnam, made worse by isolation and the trauma of the fire. They gave me pills that made my mind foggy, and talked about delusions and hallucinations. But I know what I saw, what I fought. The fire at Mammoth Creek made the national news. It burned over 5,000 acres. When it was finally put out, search teams found something in the ashes. The remains of dozens of bodies, some recent, some centuries old. The papers called it a discovery of an unknown historical burial site and evidence of a previously undocumented serial killer operating in Montana for decades. Nobody mentioned the strange marks found on the bones or the fact that they were all arranged in perfect circles. 3 people in nearby towns had to be hospitalized after suffering what doctors called mass hysteria. They all claimed to have heard a scream inside their heads the night of the fire, a scream so terrible it drove them temporarily insane. In the hospital, they let me have paper and pencils for therapy. I started drawing the stick Indian over and over, trying to get every detail right. The doctors took most of my drawings away, but I kept making more. Sometimes at night I still hear voices calling my name. The doctors say it's just my mind playing tricks, but I know better. I think burning the stick Indian didn't kill it, it just sent it somewhere else. Maybe to another forest, another mountain, maybe inside me. The forest around my old cabin stayed dead after the fire. Nothing grows there anymore. Animals avoid the area. People who hike near there say their compasses spin in circles and their GPS devices stop working. Last week, one of the night nurses came to collect my drawings. When he saw what I'd been working on, he dropped his clipboard. He told me his brother was a park ranger up in Glacier National Park, and they'd been finding dead animals arranged in circles. Hikers had been reporting voices in the woods, calling their names. Yesterday, my medical records disappeared from the hospital files. The doctors accused me of taking them, but I didn't. This morning, all my drawings were gone from my room, all except one, which I'd hidden under my mattress. When I pulled it out, I found it had been arranged with the corners, folding in to form a perfect circle. And last night on the news, they reported 3 hikers had gone missing in a recently burned section of forest, about 100 miles from here. I think it's starting again. I think the stick Indian is still out there hunting. And I'm trapped in here where nobody believes me. If you're reading this, please listen. If you're ever alone in the woods and hear someone you love calling your name, don't answer, don't follow the voice. And if you see a tall, thin shadow moving between the trees, run. Run as fast as you can and don't look back. Because the hungry months are coming again and the stick Indian is awake.